Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Nicole Tainch. I am the manager for the McDowell Foundation, and I just want to welcome everyone that is joining us here tonight for our virtual Salon series. Very happy to see all the people that are attending. If you aren't familiar with McDowell, we fund teacher-led research across Saskatchewan, such as the project that you will learn about tonight. So I want to begin the session by acknowledging that I'm joining you from Treaty 6 territory, the traditional lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis. I appreciate and honor the relationships that we share with one another as we continue to work towards reconciliation. I do know that we have people joining us from other territories tonight, so I hope that you are able to take a moment to reflect on your own relationship with the land and the people who work, live, and play there. So now I'm going to turn it over to Devin Peters, who's Vice President of the Regina Public School Teachers Association, to bring greetings for tonight.
Hello. Hopefully you can hear me. Hello, Jessica, Sam, and other guests. My name is Devin Peters, and I'm the Vice President of the Regina Public School Teachers Association. Though I was born on Treaty 6 territory in Saskatoon, I had the good fortune to spend much of my childhood on campgrounds and provincial parks spanning Treaties 2, 4, 6, and 8. For the last 15 years, I've had the pleasure of living, working, and learning on Treaty 4 territory in Regina. As Vice President, I work 50% in the classroom and 50% with the RPSDA. In my teaching assignment at F.W. Johnson Collegiate, I've had the good fortune to participate in our own locally directed community of practice that focuses on TRC, indigenization, and land-based learning. It's been a pleasure to learn professionally and grow personally as I've learned more on those subjects. With that in mind, then, it's perhaps no surprise that I was a little bit excited to receive this invitation. This invitation was to not only congratulate Jessica on behalf of the RPSDA for the completion of her McDowell project, but it was also an invitation to get to learn a little bit more. As I reviewed your project, Jessica, I couldn't help but look forward to hearing more. In particular, I'm interested to hear more about your experiences as an elementary teacher engaged in culturally responsive education. I suspect that there will be some things that come out tonight that I can adapt and apply to my own classroom context, so I'm looking forward to that. As the link chair for Regina Public School Teachers, I'm pretty sure that we have both had our fair share of experiences bouncing into systemic barriers. I could tell you that if I had a penny for every time our division said, there's no budget for this really good program, I bet you I could fund a whole other better education system with the proceeds. Thanks again to the McDowell Foundation and the STF for the opportunity to bring greetings tonight. And Jessica, thank you. And I look forward to hearing more about your journey tonight.
Thank you, Devin. I will now turn it over to our moderator to start tonight's session. Tonight, our session will be moderated by Samantha Becotte, President of the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation. Welcome, Sam.
Thanks, Nicole, and thank you, Devin. I want to start by sharing I'm joining you from Treaty 6 territory, but within my role as president, I have the honor of representing teachers across Treaty 2, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 10 territories. And as within my role, I commit to learning the true histories of our lands here in Saskatchewan and acting in a way that advances reconciliation. The Saskatchewan Teachers Federation established the Dr. Sterling McDowell Foundation for research into teaching in 1991. The foundation has supported over 300 research projects, including Jessica's project that we're going to learn more about tonight. Research reports, videos, and other resources that are developed through the McDowell Foundation can be found on the McDowell Foundation website, the STF YouTube channel, or in the Emma Stewart Resource Center. The executive of the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation values the important work of the McDowell Foundation and the support that it provides to Saskatchewan teachers. We see and hear the positive impacts that research projects like Jessica's have on public education in Saskatchewan, and the support that they provide for both teachers and students. I'm so grateful for the time and energy that Jessica and other Saskatchewan teachers have put into their research projects and their willingness to share their learnings with everyone else. So I'm extremely excited to learn more about your research here tonight, Jessica. Before I turn it over, I wanted to quickly go through a few technical things before we get started into the research presentation. So if you have questions or if you want to make any comments, you can use the question and answer feature at the top where you can also enter in or vote on questions or comments. Voting will help a question or comment rise to the top, so to speak, so that we can see it quickly. We also invite you to use your raised hand feature to speak, where you can turn on your mic if you prefer. We'll be recording tonight's session for those of you who were unable to attend, and it will be available on the McDowell website. So Jay Salakin from the STF has also kindly joined us to offer technical support because I am no help in that aspect. So happy to have Jay here to help us with all things technical. So now I'd like to invite Jessica to first introduce yourself and share your work. Once you're done presenting, we'll have some time for questions and conversation. So welcome, Jessica.
All right, thank you. I'll just share my screen here. Just making sure everybody can see that before I start. Awesome, thank you. All right, hello and good evening, everyone. So my name is Jessica Madiratta, and today I'll be presenting about my PhD research. So the title of my PhD research project has been ever-changing, but is sort of where I've landed is our participatory action research project, improving teaching practices through professional development in CRT, which is culturally responsive teaching. I say that a lot, so if you ever hear me say CRT, that is sort of the short form for that. So one of the most important things I've learned so far in my PhD research as an Indigenous scholar is how important it is to situate yourself in your work so others know who you are and what has brought you to your research topic. And I always include this quote that comes from Indigenous scholar Margaret Kovach, which is, critically reflective self-reflection is a strategy to keep us aware of the power dynamic flowing back and forth between researcher and participants. So I'm Korean Soto on my mom's side, and I'm Polish on my dad's side. I come from Becotte First Nation, and I grew up here in Regina, Saskatchewan. I grew up in a public school system that I felt did not recognize, celebrate, or honor who I was as an Indigenous student. And then in this full circle way, I now get to work in a public school as an Indigenous advocate teacher. And so it's my role to ensure Indigenous students have a sense of belonging at school. They see themselves reflected in curricula. And so, for example, just speaking from my own school, I teach at Albert School here in Regina. We run a weekly drumming group. We recently started a beading club, and we'll start smudging with our classrooms this week. So just going back to my research, as an Indigenous scholar, there were two things that were really important to me in my research. So when I was doing a pre-proposal and before I even started this research, one of my non-negotiables is that I wanted to include an elder in my work. And I didn't know how that would look at first. And I'll speak more about that on a later slide, but it was important for me to have that elder voice as a part of my research. And so what I did is I invited an elder from my community, from Becotte, and she came and spoke to the participants in my research. And again, just very grateful for McDowell that it provided an honorarium for her to come and participate in that. It's important when we invite elders or knowledge keepers into any sort of project or activity that, we honor their time by giving an honorarium. And so when she came and spoke about her role as an elder in residence. And she lives culture. She lives culturally responsive teaching when she's out in the schools and working with youth. And so she was a big part of my research. The other piece is that I always wanted to start our sessions in a good way, knowing that we might talk about some difficult things or some tough things. And we were building a relationship with one another within a community of practice. And so we always started our sessions with a smudge. We actually did all of our research sessions at the Mamawayattaton Center, which is located in North Central in Regina. It's such a beautiful building, number one. And number two, you can smudge in any part of the building. So if you're in the library, you can smudge. If you're in a classroom, you can smudge. If you're in a boardroom, you can smudge. And so I ended up booking the boardroom as sort of our space to meet. And it was just so beautiful to meet and then be able to smudge and start in a good way like that. So I just wanted to start with some context of my research project. So to practice CRT in your own classroom, in their own classrooms, educators need the opportunity to learn from and with other educators. Of course, these are things teachers can do on their own, but there's nothing more important than being able to collaborate with other educators. The methodology that I found really attractive is called participatory action research. Which is sort of a collaborative way to do research. And so this particular study gathered 6 Saskatchewan elementary educators over 5 sessions to learn about CRT practices. And so when I do say 6 participants, I also include myself in that work because I worked alongside my participants. So in the research, each of my participants, including myself, we all created personal goals for ourselves. And then we were able to enact the practices we were learning about in each of our classrooms or with the students that we worked with. Sort of the main areas or topics that each of us explored included academic achievement, home and school connection, critical consciousness, and ethnic and culturally diverse curriculum, which again includes that piece from learning from a local First Nations elder. So the two research questions that guided this project, the first one is, what are the experiences of elementary school teachers in a professional development group on culturally responsive teaching? And how do elementary school teachers perceive their engagement in this group in terms of influencing their teaching practices? So I wanted to share a little bit about the participants because without them, this research would not have been possible. So like I shared, there were 6 participants, including myself. One of the things that was really important to me is that I didn't want to just do a wide call out for teachers for this. I was specifically looking for educators that were interested in learning more about culturally responsive teaching. So because I use an Indigenous research methodology, it argues that you should find participants to work with that are interested in that work or will bring knowledge to that work. And so for my research, I actually shoulder tapped individuals for my research that I knew in the community that were trying culturally responsive teaching practices. Each of the participants in this research work in classrooms with a diverse student population, primarily large Indigenous student populations, but also a large EAL population. And just to break down my participants a little bit, 2 of my participants were Indigenous women, and they are both graduates from the SUNTEP program. Again, I really wanted to have Indigenous people as a part of my research. I really wanted that for community. And that was, again, something really important to me before I even started this project. And so those 2 Indigenous women are actually getting close to the end of their career. So they brought a wealth of knowledge to this project. And then I had 3 participants that were white settler teachers. 2 of the 3 participants are about mid of their teaching career. And then one of my participants is a fairly newer teacher that's in the field. And then all of our teachers were located here in Regina. Initially, when I started this project, I was really hoping to open this up to a sort of a larger base in Saskatchewan. And then things got a little bit tricky with ethics, where I would have had to get ethics from every single school division I got participants from, which made things a little bit tricky. So I'm really glad everybody was on board for participating in this project. So like I shared, the methodology that was really attractive to me when I was learning about methodologies is PAR, or participatory action research. So this is obviously a qualitative research methodology. It involves both researchers and participants collaborating to understand social issues and to take actions to bring about social change. So it's an umbrella term for all research approaches that engage stakeholders in each of the research process. And I did take pieces of critical participatory action research because it looks at things more in particular, such as power dynamics and things like that. So what I really like about PAR is that it seeks to understand and improve the world by changing it. At its heart is collective, self-reflective inquiry that researchers and participants undertake so that they can understand and improve upon the practices in which they participate and the situations in which they find themselves. One of the things we found out early in the process of meeting is that teachers experience a lot of tensions in their role as elementary teachers. The one thing I always share when I present about my PhD work is that it was a really interesting year to be doing this research because frankly, our provincial government had been villainizing us as teachers on billboards. And also we were navigating job actions through this project as well. And so while a lot of the participants talked about these different tensions that they experience as elementary teachers, one of the most profound things for me is just how hopeful each of my participants were. You know, and again, I think a lot of people will just understand that for teachers, that teachers go through a lot of stuff, but so many teachers are just so hopeful and they just keep pushing on. So you know, even though there's a lot of tensions they talked about, they all were willing to try these culturally responsive teaching practices, despite knowing there are some barriers and some difficulties. So I have included a quote from PAR that is specifically for Indigenous scholars. So PAR approaches often comprise an extension of Indigenous traditions of knowledge production that value inclusion and community engagement while enabling explicit engagements with matters of power, domination, and representation. So sometimes people ask me why I chose to do so many sessions. So I did 5 half-day sessions with my participants. I didn't necessarily have to do that. I could have did, you know, 1-hour interviews or some sort of other process. For me, I have a lot of respect for researchers that do interviews because I do think you can get a lot of good information out of an interview. But for me, they feel a little bit extractive. I personally wanted to work alongside my colleagues, alongside educators, and I wanted my participants to walk away with from my research project feeling like they got something out of this process too. And so again, I will say thank you to McDowell many times throughout my presentation because the McDowell Foundation paid for all the sub costs for all my participants to participate in my research for 5 half days, which obviously was a really large expense. And again, I'll be really biased because I'm also a teacher, but teachers work so hard in the day, and I never wanted to do a research project in the evening or on a weekend. Just knowing that was a big expectation if I were to do that to put on teachers. So I'm really grateful that I was able to do this within the day. And I think too, we just have a little bit more energy and, you know, that want to be chatting with other people sort of within the day, not after a long day at work. And so that was a big part of my my budget, I guess, was having those sub costs. So what my research essentially is, or what it created, was a community of practice. So I've belonged to a lot of community of practices. I've run them before, and they're just so powerful to me. So when I was doing my comprehensive exams for my PhD, I did a lot of extensive both reading and writing about teacher professional learning. And unfortunately, there's a lot of teacher PD that is not of interest to teachers. They either have to partake in it because their employer chooses for them that's what they're going to participate in. And of course, there is criticism that comes with professional learning as well. You know, the idea that we bring in experts, they come and do a session and then they leave and we never see those people again. And so what I love about community of practices, and one of the benefits of a COP is that they take the gifts and experiences that teachers already have, and they use them. They use that within that group. And so again, doing my comprehensive exams, I did a lot of research about COPs. So if you don't know what a COP is, it's a group of people who share a concern, a set of problems, a passion about a topic, and they want to deepen their knowledge and expertise in this area by interacting on an ongoing basis. And so again, that's where kind of my 5 sessions came in, which seemed like a lot, but actually really flew by. And again, the topic was CRT. And so there's sort of 3 components when it comes to a COP. The first is the domain. Members are brought together by a learning that they share. The second is the community. Their collective learning becomes a bond over time. And then last, the practice. So their interactions produce resources that affect their practice, whether they engage in actual practice together or collectively. In our case, we discussed and learned collectively, and then teachers had to go back to their classrooms and engage in their actual practices on their own. So we gathered 5 times over the 2023-24 school year. So I want to talk specifically about culturally responsive teaching. I also went back and forth for my topic if I wanted to focus on culturally responsive pedagogy or the teaching component. I think with the practicality of the teaching component is sort of why I end up going with CRT specifically. So I really do like this image that talks about 8 competencies of CRT. I like to share this image when people ask me kind of that little, how can you give me in a snapshot, I guess, what CRT might look like? Because there is a lot of resources out there in particular for this. And so when I look back on our research project, I feel like we discussed or talked about at different levels each of these 8 competencies. And so starting with one of the competencies is recognizing and redressing bias in the system, drawing on students' culture to shape curriculum and instruction, bringing real-world issues into the classroom, modeling high expectations for all students, promoting respect for student differences, collaborating with families and the local community. And I just wanted to share a little story with that. So one of my participants in the research, the goal she made for herself is she wanted increased parent engagement at her school with her class, with her students' families, their parents and guardians. And so she writes out her goal at her first session, saying that she's going to use an online tool to connect with each of her families. And then at the very last session, she had been working on the school, and she came to the realization that connecting with her families didn't mean using the electronic tool. It actually meant spending some time on the playground after the bell. It meant personally approaching families and guardians when she saw them in the hall. And so it was just really interesting to sort of that 360. She went with her goal in terms of parent engagement or getting to know her families a little bit more. Another competency is communicating in linguistically and culturally responsive ways. And last is reflecting on one's cultural lens. So I want to actually take the competency on reflecting on one's cultural lens, and I just want to share with you what we did as a COP together to talk about that competency in particular. So when people ask me what is sort of my book recommendation or my best resource for learning about CRT, I always suggest the book Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain, Promoting Authentic Engagement and Rigor Among Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Students. And that's by Zaretta Hammond. You can pick up that book, and as you read it, you're ready to start doing things in your classroom. So she has sort of these practical ideas, but she also has these really deep reflection activities for teachers to do that are reading this story. And so again, when we first met as participants, I don't think we would have been able to have the discussion we did that we were able to have in our 4th session together, because again, I brought all these random people together, and they didn't know each other. They had to get to know each other, and we had to build trust. Um, Teachers, of course, had to get to a point of they're feeling, in a space to be vulnerable. And so it was really interesting to get to this fourth session where we got to know each other a lot more, and people were being really open with one another. And so one of the things Hammond has in her book, she talks about these three types of culture. So she talks about service culture, shallow culture, and deep culture. And then she asks all of these questions. And so what we did as a COP is we actually did a talking circle style. And we sort of went around the room and we discussed these questions. And it was just such a powerful session that time. So of course, we started with these shallow culture questions that are, quite easy to identify and answer. So how did your family identify ethnically or racially? Where did you live? Urban, rural? What is the story of your family in Canada? Have you been here for a while or just a few years? And then it starts to get a little deeper. So then, then we go into these shallow culture questions. So as a child, did you call adults by their first name? Were you allowed to question or talk back to adults? And what earned you praise as a child? And then the questions get even deeper in the deep culture. And this is where we had some really rich discussions. So like, what messages did you get about why other racial or ethnic groups succeeded or not? What did your culture teach you about intelligence? Did you believe some groups were smarter than others? And so these are just some of the questions that come from that activity, but it was just really interesting talking about these things because all of these, at the end of the day, what Zaretta Hammond sort of talks about is that we need to reflect on these things because all of these things impact who we are as teachers today. And so like, even for myself, I remember walking away and thinking about these questions and what I answered, and just, reflecting on how that impacts me as a teacher today. And so, our group was really quite bonding by this fourth session together. Some of these questions were difficult and even uncomfortable to answer, but I think the strong conversations that we did have really got each of us thinking. And again, these are the type of questions that are good for all teachers to answer. The one thing specifically she talks about is that, our answers to these certain questions can sometimes lead to how we think in a deficit about certain students. And this activity in particular, she actually suggests pulling out old photo albums or diaries, or even interviewing family members as you're sort of reflecting on these. So it's one of the activities from her book that I just think is quite powerful. And then Hammond also states that if we routinely interpret other people's actions slowly through our personal culture frame, we run the risk of misinterpreting their actions or intentions. And so overall, this is a powerful activity to partake in either collectively, if you're with a group of people you trust, or individually. I also wanted to share just another activity that we did at one of our sessions. So this is actually a newer resource. It comes from the Due East Educational Equity Collaborative. And the purpose of this document is a self-reflection on culturally responsive pedagogy in particular. And this document is sort of a window into our progress and practice as culturally responsive teachers. Because as we were meeting over these sessions, I thought this would be a really good tool for us to sort of gauge if we're making progress in these different areas. So what I did here is I just have a little snapshot from this self-assessment. So this particular self-assessment and reflective conversation, it's designed to inspire inward reflection, both independently and with others, to improve equitable and high achievement outcomes for our schools, classrooms, and students. And so again, this would be also a really great tool for any staff to use, or again, a small community of practice. It worked really well for our COP just to kind of gauge where we were at. And even for me, who's done extensive reading on CRT, there's still components where I still feel like I'm in that beginning or developing stage. And so it was really good for me to be self-aware of that. So yeah, there's different indicators of effectiveness. So each of the participants spent some time independently rating ourselves in each area, and at the same time writing down examples of how we did these things or any questions that we had. Then we collectively engaged in the reflection questions together, which again just promoted a lot of conversations about our practices. I think the one thing I haven't shared is that I audio recorded all of our sessions together. So that was quite a bit, but it was really interesting listening back to all our sessions and just these really rich conversations that we had with each other. And so I'm sort of at the stage right now where I am still working through my data analysis. I sent out all the transcripts to my participants because one of the things that I put within my ethics is that all my participants have the right to omit any information, add or edit anything. So it was, yeah, a couple 100 pages of documents. So I'm being patient and letting my teachers have some time to read through those. And yeah, so I'm still waiting to get that back from everybody. So I just thought I would share some of my preliminary findings. So of course, the participants appreciated the opportunity to learn, discuss, and share with other educators as they learned about CRT. They liked that they had 5 afternoons to meet for this project. And again, that was a lot of work for them too, because they all did have to write their sub notes and be away from their students. Participants talked about looking forward to upcoming sessions. And just re-listening to our last transcript, talking about how much they would miss the group after the project was complete. The beautiful thing, I think, is that, the 6 of us within this group, we now have a network of educators that we can reach out to for help or for questions about any of this work. I think the personal goal setting was also really powerful as well, just because the teachers had autonomy to choose what they wanted. I wasn't saying you had to work on this or suggested. It was completely up to them. They made those goals in their first session, and then we did check-ins, which I thought was really good for accountability, but also celebration. So we made goals, we did a check-in about midway, and then we also talked about our goals at the very last session. And so again, from the beginning, I said, if it's a small change, a big change, it doesn't matter. We're going to celebrate whatever that looked like for each of the participants. A lot of us just talked about the power of CRT and what it can do for our school systems. One of the participants, she chose to do culturally diverse curriculum with her students because she had a high Indigenous population. Another participant did one-on-one conferences with their students to build deeper relationships with her students. Like I shared earlier, my one teacher who wanted to connect more with the parents and guardians of her students. And then 2 of the participants, they wanted to have their elders or knowledge keepers in their classroom more and wanted to work with them more. And so that was sort of their goals. I would say, just not to make everything sound all rosy. Of course, we also had a lot of conversations about systemic barriers to change. We actually used the one book during our sessions. And I chose this book. It was a US resource, but I did choose this book because it was specifically on working with Indigenous students. And so that was called Standing Together, American Indian Education as CRP. And there's a really cool chapter in there about how a community worked together from the parents all the way up to the superintendents. We had some really good conversations just about how that thinking outside of the box is really what is required for systemic change within our schools. And of course, one of the participants also brought up how there's only 6 of us in the study, and, if we had more people that were trained in this sort of approach to teaching, maybe there might be deeper impacts. And then, of course, always the idea of budget as well, recognizing we have huge budget restraints in our current education system, and that budget does play a key role within professional learning. So just some implications. So teachers, Saskatchewan students may benefit from CRT. We see that in Saskatchewan, our students continue to grow in diversity. Of course, we know there's a strong focus on improving literacy and numeracy for Indigenous students, as well as including grad rates. This might be one approach to help focus on Indigenous student achievement. And we know that research has suggested the importance of relationship building in our classrooms, and also with families and with the community. We did a lot of activities on building our critical consciousness. One of the activities we did was looking at our wheel of power and privilege, and seeing how even within our group of 6 teachers, how some participants had just much more power and privilege than other ones. And we talked a lot about leveraging power and privilege in terms of equitable opportunities for our students. And again, I just really want to promote for teachers that they can access professional learning in many ways, but that the STF does have growth opportunities such as anti-racism training that can help you grow in that area. And so in terms of recommendations, giving teachers choice in what their professional learning looks like is really important. Teachers in Saskatchewan might benefit from this type of professional learning. And the other thing is I found that using literature to help guide our discussions and our meeting together was really helpful too. So there's a wide variety of literacy around CRT that is out there. So yeah, to conclude, so my study captured several insights from 6 teachers in Saskatchewan on what meaningful professional development looks like. These 6 educators engage in personal and collective goal setting that allowed them to try CRT approaches in each of their classrooms and schools. Each participant is in a different stage in their teaching career, and this was a benefit to the collective in terms of knowledge sharing with one another. There was a theme of hope and optimism amongst the educators in the groups on the impacts of their learning, or their learning in CRT would have for both themselves as educators and then as well for their diverse student populations. And yeah, just to say again, and ask them into McDowell Foundation, this project wouldn't be what it was without the funding and with the support that was provided. So yeah, a big thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much, Jessica, for your presentation. I know I'm not teaching currently in the classroom, but excited to one day give back to the class, maybe hopefully, and look at ways that I can implement some culturally responsive teaching methods in my own class, because I know that's an area that I could definitely develop in. So we'll move now into our panel discussion question portion of the evening. So in addition to our researcher, Jessica, we also have Denise Heppner, who's joining our panel. So I'd like to welcome you, Denise, and provide you with the opportunity to introduce yourself if you'd like.
Well, thank you. I'm Denise Heppner. Can you hear me? Is my mic working? Okay, great. I'm an associate director with STF Professional Learning. I know that we have the greatest honor of working with Jessica on one of our professional learning opportunities called Supporting Indigenous Ways of Knowing in Math. So thank you so much for contributing your knowledge to that as well. I actually started following you on Twitter a year or two ago when you started looking into your research on CRT, because that's a topic that's really near and dear to my heart as well. So I'm really excited to hear about your work, and I can't wait to read your larger, oh my goodness, words tonight. Read your larger PhD report that will be coming out as well. And I did get the opportunity to read the report that you have submitted as well. And it's just such exciting work. And I think it's something that's so necessary and needed within Saskatchewan and within Canada in general. So thank you for taking this on and bringing it to some of the teachers in Saskatchewan.
I couldn't have said that better myself. Great. Thank you, Denise. I agree. I think, and you talked about it too, Jessica, that the workload that teachers are experiencing in their schools is unmanageable at times. And so for you to take on this additional work as a researcher and PhD candidate, it's really inspiring to see some important work and important research coming forward to support students and teachers in Saskatchewan. So a question for you or Denise, do you have any helpful tips in establishing a learning committee? I know you talked about shoulder tapping individuals. Is that how you would recommend people go about establishing their own community? Or how can someone prepare to engage in a learning community?
Yeah, that can look like a lot of different things. I've never actually done a COP with just in my own school that I've been at. I've usually done it with other teachers within a division, but I think it could be really powerful to do within one school because then you have a colleague that's just down the hall that you can touch base with, right? I think sometimes what's difficult with the COPs is you might only meet every few months or even every 6 months. There's these big gaps in time. So I think within your own school, you could always start a COP. During the pandemic, I ran a COP as well with a friend of mine that was a vice principal. And same thing, we just sort of shoulder tapped a few people each, and then they shoulder tap people. And so it kind of has this whole domino effect. And so it doesn't have to be this really complex thing. Yeah, I guess those would be sort of my couple ideas for that.
I love that you shoulder tapped people for your project. And I too actually think that's a really wonderful way to do it, to bring people in, because it is vulnerable work. And so you do have to kind of have that courage to step into it, and the courage to make mistakes, and the courage to learn from it. And yeah, honestly, not everybody is ready for that. So you have to be able to want to step into it and to get uncomfortable, because you're going to get uncomfortable. And so a shoulder tap is a great way to bring in people who are there, but also to really encourage people who may be on the fence a little bit and say, hey, you know what? We're going to enter this brave, safe space together and walk alongside each other to do this work. So I too really love that you shoulder tap and just bring people in and just keep asking. That's what I do. Just keep asking, because you never know if some people are going to be ready at this time or ready at this time, or, may have something that they want to try at different points in their teaching career and their personal journey. So
I love that you mentioned that people are going to be at different points of their journey, and maybe their willingness to participate in activities like this or in a community like this. And
I want to like jump in for a sec, because something that Jessica mentioned when she was talking about her project is celebrating the little steps as well as the big steps. And that's just really huge, because we are all on different places on our journey, and every step should be celebrated, whether it's an inch or a mile. So I just love that you actually had that built into your research project to celebrate those, because I think that's really important.
I agree. And I think that that's a critical step that's often missed, especially if it's not something that's like deliberately planned within the process. So absolutely celebrating all of the successes in a difficult time in education. We have to look at the bright spots to stay hopeful and stay focused forward, and really identify the good work that's happening. But you talked as well about the importance of trust within that professional learning community. So what strategies could you use aside from shoulder tapping people and having those one-on-one conversations, maybe to establish that trusting environment, whether it's when your community is just getting started or afterwards? And did you ever experience a time within the process where someone didn't feel comfortable sharing openly with the group? And what kind of strategies would you use to support those folks at kind of any time? Because that can kind of fluctuate, right? People can be feeling more comfortable one day and less comfortable another day. And so how do you support them on their journey and in the community?
So, the ethics process, it was painful to say the least, but at the same time, it's such a crucial part of research. And so, one of the components, I put it right on my consent form. And what I talked about openly at my first session is that, just that reminder that, we have health plans that have coverage for mental health, and to rely on those things if you had to, because knowing that, yeah, if, we have an uncomfortable conversation, or even those, I talked about those deep culture questions, if that stirred up anything for people, I wanted to make sure that they knew that, there are resources out there to work through that, because I didn't want anyone to have that negative experience walking away. I think, like I talked about, we would smudge at the beginning of each session. And I think engaging in ceremony together is really powerful. And of course, for the Indigenous participants, they smudge all the time, right? And for, some other participants, they don't. It's not a part of their culture. But for us to sit in number one, sitting in circle, that's really powerful. It's really, really powerful to sit in circle with people and look at each other, across from each other, and to do that ceremony. I think that really helped build trust within the group. And it's really interesting is I usually turned off my recording device during like the breaks, or I only pressed start as soon as our session started. But the couple times I forgot, and it kind of caught our break times, and we had all these really good conversations then too. And I remember one of the times I forgot to stop recording, and we're all just having a good laugh. And laughter, when you bond with people and you're laughing and you can laugh about things, I think that builds trust with one another. And so the other thing was not being always so formal, but also just like it was so funny, like the researcher in me is like, gotta start exactly at 12:45, but being okay with, hey, looking around, and we're having these great conversations and not stopping that, in terms of process of a project. And some of those conversations that the participants had with one another, about things that were education, not education, were all sort of part of the process too. And so, yeah, just that humanness. And, some of the participants even joked about how nice it was to talk to adults, right? Because we, as elementary educators, we spend a lot of time with kiddos, and, our recess breaks are spent using the bathroom and filling up our coffee, right? And so the participants also just talked about how much they enjoyed that time with other teachers. So
One of the things that I do as a non-Indigenous educator trying to step into this work is tell stories of when I messed it up and how I walked through it, and the grace and humor that I was shown as I was being taught, and I would listen and learn. So, yeah, I've got a couple of those stories, and I've personally and professionally made it part of my journey towards reconciliation to step into this work. And I still get it wrong sometimes, but how do you move through that kind of with humor and grace, and the genuine desire to learn as a non-Indigenous educator, and to make amends, and to keep trying, and to not let that stop me from keeping trying to do this work.
I don't, Jessica, those adult conversations are so needed at the end of the day some days. I know I taught high school, and they're almost adults, but it still felt like needing an adult conversation at the end of the day sometimes. And I appreciate your response to Denise. As a non-Indigenous educator, I struggle a lot, especially within this role, and looking at wanting to create change and wanting to improve our practices and make them more welcoming at the Federation, so that our Indigenous members feel comfortable entering into our spaces and being a part and being represented in all of our areas of governance, or STFPL, or whatever aspects we have within the organization. But then I get in this loop of like, I want to do something, but I don't know if it's the right thing to do. But And so, yeah, I agree. And I've been told that too, of like, you just need to mess up sometimes, and at least like you're doing something and doing it with, like doing the learning first, obviously, wanting to make sure that your head's in the right spot, but then knowing that your heart's in the right spot and being willing to try and just come at it from a good place, right? So, one thing that I've heard from a lot of non-Indigenous teachers is how you go about making connections with elders or Indigenous knowledge keepers to support some of these culturally responsive teaching practices in your class. So, do you have any recommendations on what teachers could do with that aspect of their practice?
Yeah, you know what? That's definitely a question I've heard a lot over the years as well. And again, to not to use an excuse, but to go back on that just heavy workloads that, teachers are already carrying. It's, sometimes hard to do these things. I always speak because I'm so lucky at my school that we have an elder in residence program. And so I have a knowledge keeper that comes and visits us once a week in our school. And so we're blessed to have that. I know, just speaking specifically from my school division, you can request an elder through our schools within Regina Public Schools to come and do that. I think sometimes and thinking of making connections, I sometimes suggest to people to go and participate in community events. One of the big things that First Nations people do in the wintertime is round dances. And so, I always suggest go to those community events, and, a lot of it, you're dancing, but you're also just spending a lot of time in the crowd and sitting and, getting to know the community that way, going to those types of events, or, when it's summertime, going to powwows and being a part of that. Anytime you can go to a professional learning opportunity where there's going to be an elder or knowledge keeper in attendance, what a great way to make a connection. I know, like, I'm going to be helping do our Indigenous math session in Regina Public, and they're PD session, and there's going to be an elder there, right? So those natural opportunities for you to sign up and get to know someone and meet someone. Now you have that contact. Yeah, it's not an easy task. I will say that. But I think the more you can put yourself in community and go to events where there's going to be an elder or knowledge keeper, I really suggest doing that.
So, yeah, go ahead, Devin. Sorry, I saw your hand pop up and now your mic on. Go ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciated listening to that, Jessica. I was curious to know, in effect, through this process, you've kind of become a leader in this space, and I was curious to know if you had any reflections, thinking about the needs of the folks in your community of practice here. It sounded like there was a wide variety of folks, early in the career and sort of later in the career, little experience, lots of experience. Did you have any reflections on sort of the different needs that folks seem to have at those different points of experience and sort of knowledge?
Yeah, what I found with the teachers that had been working for, they've been working for quite a few years now. They really had that curriculum piece down, right? They felt really strong in that way. And actually, both of them were really strong in that parent engagement piece too. I think, even for me, I think sometimes, in my job as an Indigenous advocate, I talk to families every single day. And I think back to my being a first year teacher, and like I would be so afraid to call, and like, I was so nervous to meet people. And so even from, and like this is my 15th year in education, even over a decade, how much I've changed, right? Um, and so yeah, I feel like they really had those pieces down packed. Um, and they also really spoke about that importance of relationships, because I think just that lived experience of teaching for so long, just really having a deep understanding of how important that was. And then our teachers that were sort of in that mid-career range, I felt had more of a heavy focus on the curriculum, but in specific really wanting to bring in more in Indigenous education, right? And so I feel like they had been dabbling with some of that. And then now this was their opportunity to really kind of hyper focus on that, and make sure that they were doing well for their Indigenous students in terms of curriculum. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
It sounds like as well within your research, you gave some choice and voice as to what they wanted to pursue with their kind of deeper inquiry as well, which I thought was a really great way to have a broad variety of topics that the teachers were interested in and engaged in. And then it really seemed to bring kind of a richness to your conversations as well, to talk about all the different things that they were doing, which is really exciting.
So along those comments from Denise as well, with that personalized goal setting, did you find that there were individuals that maybe couldn't be supported in their learning from others within the group, or did you find that everyone had their needs met because of the kind of common theme of culturally responsive teaching, or were there questions that you needed to get answers from outside sources, or are there strategies that teachers could use if they're struggling in getting answers to some of their questions or support in achieving some of their goals?
I think the nice thing about us sort of being a collective is that we did do a lot of resource sharing. And so, um, like like even when the participant said like he would look down on his paper and he saw all these like little notes of things that like he didn't think about for his own goal, but within the conversations, he's like, oh yeah, like I gotta try that, right? And kind of writing down in the margins of the paper sort of idea. I think some of these areas are really big though. Like when you think of academic achievement, it's such a big part, a big idea. And of course, there's all these things that impact academic achievement. And so that area alone is really tough. And, even when we speak of sort of like neoliberal ideas of academic achievement, right? And so navigating that was kind of interesting. And, we had conversations about like what academic achievement looks like, what is success to one person isn't success to another. And so a lot of really good conversations there, but again, some tensions and some difficulties that come with that. I think in terms of as well, like parent engagement, that's also just a really big topic. And, moving away from sort of the parent on a field trip to more that engagement piece. And so yeah, I think people felt that they could succeed in their goal. But a lot of us, still went away saying, we have to continue on this goal or adapt our goal a little bit. Because these are really big areas, right? That, you kind of actually always work on in your career. But, was a chance to really specifically focus in on, and knowing that, you're going to see these people in a few months and you got to have to talk about, hey, this is what I tried, this is what I did. And so, yeah, that accountability piece also really helped in the process. So
It's definitely not a checkbox. I agree. It's something that you always have to come back to and evolve your practice, and look for best practices and continue to strive to work better. Thinking about some of our rural and remote areas in Saskatchewan, I know you're in Regina, so you have maybe more people to draw in to create a community of practice. And as you said, it'd be great if they were in your building and you could run down the hall and talk to them during a break or during the day or at the end of the day. But for some of those rural and remote areas, do you see technology being a tool that could be used, or would that almost be a barrier to establishing that trusting environment to have the conversations that are needed?
well, it's really interesting. So I started my PhD in 2020 during the pandemic. And so when I started putting my proposal together for this project, I was like, we can't meet in person. Like, my mind was so stuck in that we're stuck at home. And so initially this project actually started as I wanted it as an online session. I wanted us, and again, that came back to that piece where all of a sudden now I would have been able to connect with all these people in Saskatchewan. And then what actually happened is this whole Zoom fatigue, right? Where, everyone is just so fatigued from Zoom. And even myself, I did all my PhD courses online. And even as myself as the researcher, I'm like, I cannot do more Zooms. I just, and so I remember emailing McDowell and saying, I said I was going to do this online, but can I please do this in person? And Ellen, who was in at the time, she said, yeah, you can do this in person. And to be fair, I'm glad I did. I think that was really important to me. And I think the best choice was for me to do it in person. That being said, yeah, I totally think technology is a huge tool for connection. Like I said, I did run a COP during the pandemic with a friend that was a vice principal. And when we were all missing connection and I remember was logging into those Zooms and just being like, oh, people that I can, who are going to understand what I'm talking about and, who can see things from my perspective. And so, the balancing the Zoom fatigue with, still using it as this really excellent tool to connect with people all over the province or, the country, whatever that looks like. I still think it's a really powerful tool.
And Denise, I know STFPL has online educational opportunities as well. Do you find that there's any change in terms of what people are getting out of those opportunities, whether they're in person or online?
That's something I'm really exploring right now, actually, because I used to teach online classes at the university where they had to engage online because they were getting a grade for it. But and Jessica had some accountability because they're part of this research project. So you've got this set date and you're going to do this and you're going to meet and there's accountability. And with the new asynchronous courses we're developing, it's kind of like, well, hello. It's like you're reaching out into the abyss and I miss that communication. So I'm looking at different ways of building online community. And actually, I'm looking at some of the research on how to use Indigenous strategies, Indigenous pedagogy in online environments. So there are some Indigenous scholars that have been doing some work in this area. And I'm really interested in that because Indigenous pedagogy is very relational and place-based and context-based. So I think that we can really learn a lot from maybe how we can incorporate some of those relational strategies within our asynchronous courses. So that has me really excited.
I'm excited to see what comes from those. I know STFPL does great work along with McDowell does great work as well. So there's lots of opportunities for teachers to learn within Saskatchewan, whether it's accessing the reports or opportunities to learn through STFPL. You talked about some of the barriers, Jessica, in your presentation, and I'm one to tend to to lean to the doom and gloom. So I'm going to try not to do that. I think you did incredible things, and obviously the McDowell grant supported that work and being able to access time within the school day. So if budget constraints weren't an issue, how do you imagine professional learning communities being established within schools or school divisions or even across Saskatchewan?
Yeah, I think, I'll just go back to having that time and space within a school day is really important. And, sometimes I wondered if I should do a full day or a half day. And, within a half day, you can actually get a lot accomplished. And so, yeah, you sort of remove that budget piece and if people have an opportunity to meet, and something that's ongoing, that's one of the things that I saw over and over in the literature on professional learning, is that, teachers will do a one-off thing and then they never look at it again, or maybe they try it for a little bit, but then it falls off the radar. When you have ongoing sessions, you can continue to build, you can continue to try new things. And again, if it's a topic or a passion of yours, it's something you'll look forward to and something you want to keep learning about. And so, yeah, I think, professional learning communities within a school or school divisions that that can have that dedicated time to meet on an ongoing basis, I think is a really good thing.
I'm not going to put Devin on the spot, but I know he's the link chair. And I'm just thinking, like Bobby Tyfire always says, our executive director, that all roads lead to bargaining. And I just can't help but think that, like, wouldn't that be such a great thing for a link team to negotiate maybe an expansion of your professional development funds, or if locals don't have a professional development funds, the opportunity to use that to support community practice or a professional learning community.
Rest assured, I'm taking notes. But yeah, I am also reflecting. I'm part of the same division as Jessica, and so it's interesting to hear her reflections on communities of practice, because I think that there's also some stumbling blocks when you make communities of practice a division-wide sort of initiative, and so I'm interested to hear the success story around it, because I know that not every single one goes as well, and perhaps it's just missing some of the passion and some of the expertise. But I guess I'd be curious to know if you had any reflections beyond that. I was trying to frame a question maybe around, like, if we could wave the magic wand of budget and policy change and make it all right. What does the ideal look like if we were going to implement this in, whether it's in our big urban school division or just in general? What does the perfect one look like?
Ooh, that's a tough question. Yeah, you know what? I don't want to make everything sound so rosy, right? Like I had such a powerful experience with this research project, but also recognizing that, certain people are going to love professional learning, and there's some people who might not want to do a COP. Like, that might not be their mode of professional learning, right? And so I think that makes things a little tough too, where it's such an individual thing. I love COPs. I've had such good experiences with my COPs. But again, they've always been a passion topic for me. I did one on deepening an understanding of reconciliation. The work of TRC, the TRC calls to action is so close to my heart. So, I've had all these positive experiences, but for some people, they would rather, maybe have an afternoon to catch up on prep or other things and their professional learning might be the 1-day conference or the 2-day conference. And so I think just really recognizing that professional learning looks different for every teacher. And of course, knowing that, the best practice isn't, everybody has to do this, or, I think that's actually a negative, right? Unfortunately, we've all been in things that, maybe aren't particular to our role or to our job. And, you're wishing you were in your classroom to be doing something else, right? So it's such an individual thing. If someone loves a COP and they have the passion for it, great. But just knowing that it's not everybody's cup of tea, I guess.
You could almost draw some parallels between forcing everyone to do the CFP and a classroom that isn't very culturally responsive. I think there's probably some lines that reflect there.
Yeah, and I was just thinking that forced PD that teachers are sometimes made to do that doesn't necessarily apply to the goals that they have set out. So if they don't feel safe in that environment, then it's not going to be effective for them. I think you've kind of answered the next question that I was going to ask you as well through that answer of, can professional learning communities, or do you see them fully replacing any external professional development that teachers would get? But I think you've answered that for me with that last comment, but maybe not.
Yeah, I would just say, yeah, I kind of did, but yeah, I just think having that array of options for people, right? And again, like I'm a bit of an introvert, so I liked having this little small group of 6. When I ran a COP once, there was like 40 people, and I was like sweating and nervous, and as facilitator, right? Just because I like those small, intimate environments. So the environment of a COP plays a big role too, right? If you're an introvert like me, you might not feel as safe in a group of 40 plus people, but you'll thrive in a group of 3 to 5, right? And so I still think there should be a lot of options for professional learning for teachers to choose from.
So, in your report, you had a number of benefits that you had listed out. I just had a question about one of them, or wondered if you could elaborate on one of them. You said a third benefit of professional learning community is moving from PD to collaborative learning. And you said language really matters when speaking about learning opportunities for educators. So, can you elaborate a little bit on that, what you mean by that the language really matters when we're speaking about learning opportunities?
Oh, that's a good question. I should have had my report out with me. I think I may have been referring sort of to the idea of collaboration. Um, for that. Yeah, like just I guess the idea like the PD where somebody stands on the front and they're reading off a PowerPoint, or the experts at the front and they do all the speaking. I think professional learning should have a collaborative piece where participants are also having that chance to talk and to share their gifts, because I think sometimes with PD, when you bring in an expert, and don't get me wrong, the experts aren't experts for a reason, but sometimes it's a one way, right? It's sort of that banking concept that Freire talks about, right? Where you're just inserting into the participants and forgetting that they come with their own gifts and their own expertise. They have lived experiences as educators. And so I think that's a really important component to remember, that collaborative piece. That teachers, this is their learning, so they have to have an ownership. They have to have a piece in that too.
So maybe the last thing I finish with as a question is, and I mean, Denise, you can answer too where you think this might go, but is there anything from your project that you wish that you could have expanded on more, or areas for further research? And then maybe for Denise, is there anything that has come from this that has kind of like sparked something for you within STFPL that we may be able to go to, or even something within the Federation that we could do to support this work?
I can hop in first. Um, so I actually want to continue this work of a COP on culturally responsive teaching, or something in that area. I actually had a planning meeting with one of my colleagues this week. We're doing a treaties in the classroom session at the end of this month, and we get 1 hour to do it. And I was like, I can't talk about treaties in only an hour. Like, and again, treaties is just another super a passionate subject for me. And so I said to him, I'm like, I need to have a COP on treaties, right? Like I need to, and again, like maybe culture responsive teaching, maybe something else, but yeah, I just, the time that it allows just opens up so much more opportunities. So it's something once I am maybe not writing a dissertation that I would like to have dedicate some more time to. And again, just because I really love the idea of COPs.
I think a COP in this work would be really powerful. I'm actually in Regina right now because tomorrow I'm doing a workshop called Culturally Responsive Pedagogy that came out of my own PhD work. So when I say I have a vested interest, it's been near and dear to my heart as well, which is why I was so excited to come here and listen to what you're doing, because it's lifelong learning, right? It's always a journey, and there's never an end to this work. And I think as we move forward towards reconciliation, we need to just keep learning and keep listening and keep working in collaboration with each other, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to move forward in this journey of reconciliation. One thing that I would like to say that I read in the research and that I've also seen is that sometimes the term culturally responsive pedagogy isn't being people are saying it's culturally responsive pedagogy, but they're not actually implementing all of the parts of it. And Jessica had mentioned that there was 3 parts, and there's that student learning, which is that high expectations, and then there's that cultural competency piece, like who are you as the teacher and who are your students. And then there's also that social consciousness, that criticality piece, where we're really looking at some critical questions and disrupting the status quo and the systems that we're working towards. And often when people say that they're using culturally responsive pedagogy, it's really at those surface levels that Jessica was talking about. And it's that, well, we looked at the food and we looked at the dress and we looked at the music and the holidays, but that is just scratching the surface of all of these levels of culture. And if you look at the founders of culturally relevant, culturally responsive, and then looking forward at culturally sustaining pedagogy, you need to have those 3 components, and you really need to have all of those and not just have those surface level cultural conversations. So this is really exciting work. And one of the things that we're doing at STFPL is working together with people who are doing McDowell research projects, because to have teacher classroom-based, school-based research in Saskatchewan is huge. Just that is some gold nugget learning that we want to be able to share. So I've been working with some of our other researchers and creating those into professional learning opportunities for teachers. So I was going to reach out, Jessica, later and say, hey, but maybe I'll wait till you're done your PhD, because I know that is a ton of work. And I'm super proud of you for doing that. It is just amazing work, and all the best. And when you're done, please reach out after you've breathed and napped and all the things. I am working with some researchers who did the deep unsettling work of treaty education. So we're creating that into a professional learning opportunity. And it would be wonderful to make a culturally responsive pedagogy off of your work, because it will be totally different than mine, and working together will just be amazing. So I'm really excited about that. Although you haven't said yes, but
So thank you all for your participation. Jessica, the research, like Denise said, I look forward to reading the larger report with all of your findings that when you're done it all. And I wish you the best of luck with your PhD and your dissertation. I can only imagine how much work that is. I have heard from others who have done theirs and seen the struggle. So like I said, on top of teaching, it's absolutely incredible. And I couldn't agree more with Denise that the research projects that are coming out of McDowell are absolutely top notch, and yours is right there in there. It's I'm really proud of the work that teachers do to support best practice here in Saskatchewan, and as Denise said, that important work to truth and reconciliation. So thank you so much for sharing that with us here tonight, and Denise for your participation in the panel. I really appreciate the conversation, and I hope that you both joined it or enjoyed it as well. But I'm going to turn it over to Nicole to finish this off for tonight. So thank you all for your participation.
Thanks, Sam. So I just wanted to thank everybody for taking the time to join us tonight. This is our first Salon series for the 24-25 school year, so that's really exciting. The McDowell Foundation exists to enrich teaching and learning by supporting teacher-led research here in Saskatchewan. We encourage teachers to explore questions about themselves, their schools, and the overall teaching profession. We believe in the professionalism of teachers and the need to ensure that good research comes from all of us, not just external spaces. So we are very pleased to have been able to provide the space tonight for these conversations, and we hope that they continue whether they're in staff rooms, coffee shops, classrooms, boardrooms, or other places where decisions around education are being made. Thank you to Jessica and Denise for sharing your knowledge and experiences tonight. Thank you, Sam, for your support and leadership as moderator. And of course, thank you, Jay, for making sure that everything worked so smoothly technology-wise. And finally, just wanted to thank the many donors and supporters of the McDowell Foundation, including the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation, which allows us to continue to support teacher voice and inquiry. For more information about this project, or to look up any of the other McDowell projects, or to maybe donate some money to McDowell, please visit our website at www.mcdowellfoundation.ca. Thank you again for joining us tonight, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. Good night.